I didn't even realize I had collapsed. One moment, I'm standing there looking down at my forearms. In the next moment, I find myself in this completely different dimension. I saw what I can only explain is a gigantic, golden, reddish, glowing, pulsing source of energy. I'm Philip Hasheider. I live in south central Wisconsin, and I'm a farmer, a writer, and I've written a number of books on local history, many on agriculture, which has been my life, and also family stories. I had an unusual experience in an early October morning back in 2015. When I woke up that morning, I had no idea that by the end of the day, I would become an expert in dying, but I'd also become an expert in hope. Through no fault of my own, I was dead on our local hospital's rehab fitness room floor for over 6 minutes after having completed modest 20 arm curls. But that morning started out like every other morning. I get up and I go out to our farm's pasture to check on our grazing beef cattle, make sure everything's okay from the night before and that there's no problems. Every morning that I went out there, previous to this morning, I could walk amongst them. I could get near them. I could talk to them. I could scratch them. I could, just get up close to them, and they would hardly pay any attention to me because they were eating, having their dinner, breakfast. That particular morning was different. And when I walked out there, I didn't get 200 feet from them. They were all lying down on the grass, all 27 head. And one of them saw me coming and jumped up, looked at me, perked her ears forward like she was listening for something, and took off running across the field. Went about 300 feet. She stopped, turned around, and looked at me. Well, that was really unusual. But her actions caught the attention of the rest of them, and they all got up very quickly, looked at me the same way, and took off running and joined her across the field. And again, that was so unusual because that had never happened before, not even the morning before it. So I saw what I needed to see. And I didn't really think anything of it other than that this is really strange. So I turned around and I went back to our farmyard and went into the house to change because that morning I had arranged to have the tires on our car replaced. So I needed to go into our local village, which is 12 miles from our farm. And I usually threw in my gym bag because if I had a chance, I would go for a workout at the local hospital's fitness area. So that morning I drove in and I realized I was way too early for getting the tires changed. So instead of turning right, I turned to go get tires replaced. I turned left and headed to the hospital's fitness center. Got there, parked, went downstairs, changed, came back up, said hi to the staff people that I knew because I'd been going there for 5-6 months previous to that, and did my stretches, and sat down at the arm curl machine and proceeded to do 20 modest arm curls just to get going. Talked to one of the staff members as she walked by. I stood up, and the strangest thing happened. Both of my forearms started tingling, so I looked down at them. It's like they tingled when you lie on them and you get up, and all of a sudden the blood's rushing back. But both of them were doing that. And that is the last thing I remember until roughly 8-10 hours later. But looking back, my big question was, okay, why did this happen right there at that particular point in time with all that help available and not 1 hour earlier when I was out in our pasture with our cattle, when no one would have found me for probably 6-8 hours because my wife had a full-time job and she was gone. And if she came home looking for me, she wouldn't even know where to look. So those were the big questions of why it happened, where it did, when it did, and not somewhere else. But what I found was that I didn't even realize I had collapsed. One moment, I'm standing there looking down at my forearms. In the next moment, I find myself in this completely different dimension. And to use human words for what I experienced has been tough because it's the best approximation I can make as to what I experienced and saw. So I found myself floating on what I will describe as a raft. But it wasn't a raft made of wood. It was an energetic raft. And I was floating on these waves of energy that were coming towards me. And not only were they coming towards me, they were passing through me. And I never hesitated to stop and think, why? Because I didn't realize at that moment that I had died, that I had left my body. I just realized that I was in some place that I don't recall ever being before. But these energy waves were surrounding me. They were enfolding me with love and with knowledge and with welcome. It was an incredible feeling, and it filled me up with what I remember as a sense of great warmth. And so when I looked up from watching these waves come in, I saw what I can only explain is a gigantic, golden, reddish, glowing, pulsing source of energy. It was pulsating knowledge and welcome and acceptance out in all of the directions, including through me. It filled up the space in this dimension, if you can imagine packing 10 million suns into an orb. And it was that intensity. But yet I was so close I could reach and touch it and not get burned up. And I didn't even think that this was strange. It just felt so natural. It felt so much like being somewhere I had been before, or maybe someone would say it's like being at home. When I looked more at this glow, besides the energy waves coming out of it, I saw these little sparkles of energy shooting out. It's like sparklers coming out all over the surface of this and going in all different directions that you can imagine. We tend to think of right, left, up, down, front, back, but this was going in all different directions. So I decided to look. I remember deciding to take a look at what was to what we would assume is the right side of me. And what I saw, I can best describe as infinite multitude of dimensions and universes. And I've used the analogy in other, with people that I talk to about this, that if you take our universe, everything we know about it, all the distances involved, billions of light years in one direction and another in another direction, all the planets, all the solar systems, all the black holes, whatever you can consider in our universe that we understand, and you take that all and you compress it down to a single sheet of paper. And then you suspend it out here in this eternal dimension. And then you take another one and suspend it right next to that, and another one, and you go in an infinite direction one way, an infinite direction another way, an infinite direction another way, behind me an infinite direction. Each one of these being unique dimensions or universes, but still were attached with an energetic filament that reached up and attached itself to what I'll describe as a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this golden essence, this golden pulsing knowledge. And at that moment, I realized what I was looking at was what I'll call the source of all creation, the divine creator, the God essence, whatever word resonates with another person to understand a higher, ultimately higher knowledge where everything emanates from. Well, besides all of that, I decided to take a look behind me. Since these energy waves were still going through me, I was curious as to where they went. So I turned around, as we understand turning when you're in a non-human form. And what I saw was infinity. And that is because the eternal emulsion, the emulsion of eternity, acted like a magnifying glass, so that the farther I looked through this emulsion, the clearer everything became. Which is really, for a human being, that's difficult to comprehend. But it was so easy because I could look and see. Well, I turned back, and when I looked at myself, I saw what I can do. Best description would be like a hologram outline of myself. That's how I perceived me. But I realized at that moment that the me was one of those little sparks that had come out at some point. And that is how I exist, as part of the DNA of that creator energy. And that somehow I had expanded into a form where my spiritual intellect could understand it was still me. Well, unknown to me at that time, because I still hadn't realized that I had died and that there were a dozen EMTs and hospital staff back at the fitness room, giving me chest compressions, electric shocks to try to restart my heart. And as I said, it took over 6 minutes before they really did. Had I known at that point that I had died and was still lying there, I didn't. But had I known that, I still couldn't have called them to tell them, "Hey, don't worry, I'm in a great place. There's nothing, wrong with letting me go here. I mean, I can stay here forever. This is great." Uh, I couldn't tell them that. And I couldn't tell them that if they didn't get me back to myself, that they should feel bad about it, because things were really good where I was. And then, in less than a blink of an eye, I was no longer in that dimension, and I was back in my body. And I know all this because I had gotten the medical reports to understand the timeline. So I was gone on the longest trip I've ever taken in 6 minutes. And I was given an experience that would take me a long, long time to understand, and even longer to be able to explain to anyone. And yet, it would still be another 8 months before I would be given the answer as to why I came back and didn't stay there. And so that is the essence of my experience. There's lots of things that I've thought about and now understand about it that I didn't initially. After my experience, I now believe we have guides of our own. I don't think they influence us. I think they provide paths of opportunity for choices. They don't make the decisions for us, but our guides are there to bring this opportunity, make a pathway for different choices. And thinking about that, it really makes sense because that morning I could have chosen to go right and just waited for my turn to get the tires changed. But instead, I took the choice to go left and went to the hospital's fitness rehabs, which was better. Well, I'm here, so obviously the one of turning left was better. But I still had two choices. Would I have survived, or would it have even happened at the other place? I have no idea. But because it happened where it did, that's where my path is led. So I think the opportunities are there for all of us in the choices we make. And we have to accept our choice. I mean, it's nobody else's fault. So you have to kind of own responsibility for the choices you make and live with what happens after that. We are here to recognize the divinity in everyone else. And understanding and recognizing that is the portion of love that the creator energy has instilled in each of us. And that's part of our journey. But yet, the pathway on this journey is hope. And we can all take that pathway if we choose. That's what I would want people to remember the most. My story is, what it is. But my message is that there is hope, even if it doesn't appear that way. Because we don't die. Our bodies do. Yes, I understand that. But we don't. Our inner essence, that part of me that expanded to become a hologram, will coalesce and become that inner spark of me that leaves when my body finally uses up all its fuel. And it's the same with you. It's the same with everyone else who listens to this. And you don't have to believe me because you'll find out eventually anyway. But it does help frame this dimension in a completely different way if you look at it that way. That's what I hope people will remember.